Galactic leaders desperate as humanity rejects every treaty. The Galactic Council chamber had never been this silent. The gathered species, representing the most powerful civilizations in the universe, sat in stunned disbelief. It was supposed to be a historic day, a moment where humanity would finally be integrated into the galactic order. Instead, they had just witnessed the impossible. Ambassador Thalvar of the Ulari Collective broke the silence first, his voice struggling to remain composed. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Let us. No misunderstanding, interrupted Ambassador Elias Voss, the human representative. His voice was firm, unwavering, carrying the weight of 1 billion unspoken words. He let the pause stretch before delivering the final blow. Humanity rejects all terms. We will not join. We will not be ruled. We will stand alone. The declaration sent shockwaves through the chamber. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the delegates. Some hissed in frustration. Others whispered in hushed tones, their translators struggling to process the sheer absurdity of the statement. It was madness. No species had ever rejected the Galactic Council. No species had dared to. Voss stood tall, his expression unreadable. He knew exactly what he had done. And he knew the storm it would unleash. The weight of defiance. High Chancellor Eurolis, leader of the council, slammed a clawed hand against the table. His normally serene demeanor cracked. Ambassador Voss, he growled, do you understand the consequences of this decision? Voss met his gaze without flinching. Perfectly. The Chancellor inhaled sharply, forcing himself to remain calm. We offer protection, technology, resources. You gain everything. Why refuse? Voss sighed. He had expected this, but the answer would be no easier for them to hear. We have studied your history. The treaties you speak of are chains in disguise. Every civilization that has signed has become dependent, economically, militarily, technologically. Their sovereignty? Gone. The room darkened as holograms flashed into existence. A once mighty empire, now a vassal state. A species that had been warriors, now reduced to bureaucratic servants. A thriving culture, now stagnant and docile under council control. This, Voss said, pointing to the screens, is not the fate of humanity. The chamber erupted. Shouts. Protests. Threats. You reject our authority? You reject peace. An enraged reptilian diplomat spat. No, Voss said coldly. We reject submission. The hidden truth. In the shadows of the chamber, another presence listened. One that had remained silent through the entire session. Admiral Kales of the Zendari Dominion, one of the council's enforcers. His people thrived on war. And they knew humanity was dangerous. Not because of their fleets. Those were still relatively unknown. Not because of their weapons, though rumors of their military advancements were concerning. It was their refusal to kneel. Let them leave, Kales murmured to his second-in-command, his glowing eyes narrowing. Let them believe they are free. The younger officer frowned. Sir? Kales smiled darkly. We give them one chance. And if they do not submit willingly, his claws tapped the armrest. We will make them. A warning unheeded. Back on Earth, the transmission had already reached the highest levels of power. The response was unanimous. The United Earth Coalition President, Helena Rains, stood in the war room watching the feed. A council aide swallowed nervously. Madam President, do you think they will let us walk away? Rains didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to General Carter, the Supreme Commander of Earth's military. Status report? Carter's voice was steel. Project Revenant is active. The fleets are in position. We're ready. Rains exhaled slowly. The council thought humanity was small, weak, alone. They were wrong. And soon, they would find out. The Galactic Council chamber was still in chaos. The echoes of humanity's defiance rippled across the room, shaking the very foundation of interstellar diplomacy. High Chancellor Eurolis stood motionless, his mind racing. He had witnessed countless negotiations, but never had a species rejected the council so brazenly. It was suicide. Or was it? Across the chamber, Admiral Kales of the Zendari Dominion watched in silence. His crimson eyes gleamed with amusement. He had suspected this would happen. But now it was confirmed. Humanity wasn't just refusing to comply. They were preparing for war. And that made them the most dangerous species the council had ever encountered. Behind closed doors. After the session, an emergency meeting was called, without the human delegation. Eurolis leaned forward, his massive fur-covered hands gripping the table. We must act swiftly. If humanity refuses peace, they invite war. A dozen voices overlapped, each species voicing their concerns. Some called for immediate sanctions. Others whispered of a military strike. The Alari ambassadors' gills flared. If we allow them to remain independent, others will follow. Our authority will crumble. A hulking reptilian warlord from the Vekker Dominion bared his teeth. Then we crush them before they become a threat. Admiral Kalish chuckled softly. A fascinating proposal. The room fell silent. Kalish was no politician. He was a soldier. And when he spoke, people listened. I've studied them. Humans are unpredictable, but they are not fools. They knew exactly what they were doing today. Which means, he leaned in, his claws tapping against the polished surface. They are already prepared for war. The room grew cold. Uroli's fur bristled. Then we must act before they gain an advantage. Kalish smiled darkly. Agreed. We send a message. A show of force. Earth's deep space scanners detected the incoming fleet 6 hours before they arrived. 50 Council warships, led by Admiral Kalish himself, dropped out of hyperspace just outside the Sol system. Their presence was not subtle. It was a warning. Inside the United Earth Coalition's war room, alarms blared. Officers scrambled to analyze the incoming data. General Carter studied the holo display with a grim expression. They're not here to negotiate. President Helena Rains nodded. Open a channel. The transmission connected, and Kalish's imposing figure appeared on screen. His scaled lips curled into something that might have been a smile. Madam President, he said smoothly, I bring an offer. Rains folded her arms. An offer. Kalish's eyes gleamed. Surrender. Silence. Then Rains laughed. She actually laughed. Kalish blinked in surprise. Do you find this amusing? Rains' expression hardened. I find it pathetic. Kalish's smile faded. Then you leave us no choice. The first shot. Without another word, the transmission cut. Moments later, a single plasma round was fired toward Earth's lunar defense station. A warning shot. The meaning was clear. Submit or be destroyed. Inside the war room, tension thickened. The lunar station's commander called in. No casualties, but they're testing us. Rains turned to Carter. Time to show them what they're dealing with. Carter nodded. Deploy Task Force Revenant. Across the system, hidden in the darkness of space, human warships came to life. The Revenant awakens. Unlike the bulky, over-designed ships of the Council, Earth's warships were built for war. The Revenant-class dreadnoughts, Earth's best-kept secret, moved like shadows, their matte black hulls absorbing all light. They had no glowing insignias, no decorative flares. They were made for one purpose, to kill. Kalish's fleet detected movement too late. In an instant, 3 Council frigates vanished, cut down by weapons that didn't even appear on their scanners. Panic erupted. What in the void was that? A Zendari officer shrieked. Kalish's eyes narrowed. His fleet was supposed to be superior. Yet they hadn't even seen the attack coming. This wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. A message in blood. Inside the UEC war room, Carter watched the feed with satisfaction. Admiral Kalish, I suggest you check your fleet status. Kalish growled as his tactical display updated. 7 more ships, gone. Destroyed before they could even return fire. Rains' voice cut through the silence. This is your only warning, Admiral. The message was clear. Leave or we end this now. Kalish clenched his jaw. He had underestimated them. Retreat, he growled. Now. The Council fleet turned and fled. Humanity had spoken. And the galaxy had heard. The Galactic Council was in full-scale crisis mode. The humiliating defeat at Earth's doorstep spread through the interstellar networks like wildfire. It wasn't just that humanity had defended itself. They had done the impossible, obliterating an elite Council task force without suffering a single loss. For the first time in 1,000 years, the balance of power had shifted. And the Council had no idea how to respond. The Council in panic. High Chancellor Uroli sat in his private chamber, hands trembling. Reports poured in from every sector. Member species were questioning the Council's authority. Some were even discussing alliances with Earth. The precedent was terrifying. If humanity could defy the Council and win, others would try. A secure line buzzed. It was Admiral Kalish. Uroli answered, his voice tense. Explain yourself. Kalish, still aboard his battered flagship, growled in frustration. You saw the reports. They were ready for us. Ready? They annihilated you. Kalish's claws tapped against his console. We underestimated them. Their ships are unlike anything we've seen. He paused. And their weapons? What about them? Euryalus snapped. Kayles hesitated. We couldn't see them. Silence. Euryalus narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Kayles exhaled sharply. They were invisible. No energy readings, no weapon signatures. Just death. Euryalus' fur bristled. If that was true, then the humans weren't just a problem. They were a nightmare. The war declaration. The council had only one option left. Total war. A broadcast was sent across the known galaxy, declaring humanity an existential threat. Every fleet, every army, every mercenary under the council's control was mobilized. The plan was simple: overwhelm Earth before they had time to react. The invasion force would be the largest in history, 100,000 warships, billions of troops. No species had ever withstood such an assault. Victory was assured. Humanity's response. On Earth, the UEC War Room received the Council's declaration. General Carter read the transmission and smirked. They're throwing everything at us. President Raines nodded. As expected. An aide looked worried. Madam President, we're talking about the largest fleet in galactic history. Do we even have a chance? Raines turned to the holo display showing the approaching enemy force. She smiled. We don't need a chance. We have a plan. She turned to Carter. Deploy Project Revenant. The room fell silent. Then Carter grinned. Yes, ma'am. The ambush of the century. 2 weeks later, the Council's grand invasion force arrived at the Sol system. 100,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace. The sheer scale of the armada blotted out the stars. At the center of the fleet was the Council's pride, the dreadnought Imperator, a mobile fortress larger than Earth's moon. Its shields alone could withstand planetary bombardment. Euryalus watched from the command center aboard the Imperator. This ends today, he muttered. Then something strange happened. The human fleet wasn't there. No orbital defense lines. No planetary blockade. Nothing. It was silent. Kaylee's instinct screamed. Something's wrong. Then hell arrived. The Revenant fleet reveals itself. From the darkness beyond Pluto they emerged. Not thousands. Not even hundreds. Just 12. 12 ships against 100,000. And yet, Kaylee's felt fear crawl down his spine. The Revenant-class dreadnoughts glided forward, silent and deadly. Their matte black hulls seemed to drink in the light. Their movements were precise, calculated. Then they opened fire. But not with conventional weapons. There were no visible laser beams, no torpedoes, no railguns. Instead, ships simply vanished. One by one, Council warships disappeared, their signals cutting off as if they had never existed. The fleet's formation collapsed instantly. Kaylee's officers screamed. What is happening? Euryalus watched in horror. The humans weren't fighting a battle. They were hunting. The truth about Project Revenant. Inside Earth's war room, President Raines watched the battle unfold. A young officer muttered in awe, "It's working." Raines nodded. Project Revenant was never about building a bigger fleet. It was about breaking the rules of war. The Revenant-class ships didn't use traditional weapons. They used singularity disruptors. Instead of destroying enemy ships, they collapsed them into pocket singularities. No wreckage. No survivors. Just instant annihilation. It was the ultimate weapon. And the galaxy had just witnessed it firsthand. The fall of the Imperator. Kaylee's watched as his fleet was systematically erased. He turned to Euryalus. We have to retreat. Euryalus shook his head. We can't. If we run, we lose everything. Kaylee's jaw clenched. He hated this, but the Chancellor was right. If they fled now, the Council's rule was over. Then we fight. They turned the Imperator's weapons on the Revenant fleet. Massive plasma cannons fired, igniting space itself. The void filled with explosions. But when the light faded, the human ships were still there, untouched. Then one of the Revenant dreadnoughts aimed directly at the Imperator. Kaylee's blood turned to ice. No. The Imperator vanished. The largest warship in the galaxy, the pride of the Council, was gone. The Council's surrender. With their flagship destroyed and their fleet crumbling, panic overtook the invaders. Across the battlefield, ships activated emergency jumps. The largest invasion force in history was retreating. Humanity had won. Inside Earth's war room, silence filled the chamber. Then Carter exhaled. It's over. Raines shook her head. Not yet. She turned to her officers. Send a message to the Council. Carter raised an eyebrow. Terms of surrender? Raines smiled coldly. No. Terms of their survival. The Galactic Council's armada was shattered. The survivors fled through hyperspace, the largest invasion force in history reduced to ruins. Yet even as the Council forces retreated, Earth did not pursue. They didn't need to, because the galaxy had already changed forever. The final message. Deep inside the Council's core headquarters, High Chancellor Uroles sat frozen, his fur drenched in cold sweat. All across the galaxy, broadcasts of the battle flooded every system. Billions had witnessed the impossible. The humans had stood alone, and won. The Council's aura of absolute power was gone. A chime echoed through the chamber. A priority transmission from Earth. Uroles hesitated. He had no choice but to accept. The hologram flickered, revealing President Rains. She looked calm, controlled, dangerous. Uroles swallowed. Madam President. Rains didn't blink. Chancellor. A long silence stretched between them. Then Rains spoke words that sent a chill through the entire council. You lost. Now let's talk about how you survive. Humanity's terms. Uroles straightened, trying to recover some sense of authority. We acknowledge our miscalculation. Rains raised an eyebrow. Miscalculation. She leaned forward. You sent an extermination force against us. You expected us to kneel. Her eyes hardened. Now you're the ones on your knees. Uroles flinched. Every council delegate watching the transmission felt it. They had ruled the stars for 1,000 years, forcing species into submission through intimidation and superior firepower. But now, they were at the mercy of humanity. Uroles forced himself to remain composed. What are your terms? Rains leaned back. Simple. She held up a hand, raising 4 fingers. 1. The Council disbands all military forces indefinitely. No fleets. No warships. No exceptions. Murmurs of panic filled the chamber. 2. You publicly declare that humanity is not bound by your treaties, laws, or governance. We are independent. Permanently. A council delegate slammed his fist on the table. Impossible. The council cannot. Rains ignored him. 3. You release every species currently under your control. Your empire ends today. The room erupted into shouts of outrage. Uroles' claws dug into his throne. You're demanding the collapse of our entire civilization. Rains didn't flinch. No. She lowered her hand, leaving just 1 finger raised. This isn't a demand. It's the only reason you're still alive. Silence. Uroles clenched his jaw. And the 4th condition? Rains smiled. Any attempt to oppose these terms will be met with a response. Her expression darkened. A final response. The implication was crystal clear. The next war wouldn't be fought. It would be ended. Instantly. The end of the council. The council chamber descended into chaos. Some screamed for defiance. Others called for retreat. A few, the smartest among them, realized the truth. They had already lost. And so, within hours, the greatest empire in galactic history dissolved. The Galactic Council was no more. Its fleets? Dismantled. Its influence? Erased. Its rule? Over. The galaxy belonged to no one now. It was free. The dawn of a new era. Across the stars, oppressed species celebrated. For the first time in millennia, they were masters of their own fate. On Earth, President Rains and General Carter stood inside the UEC war room, watching the Council's final transmission. Carter exhaled. It's done. Rains nodded. For now. Carter frowned. You think they'll come back? Rains didn't answer immediately. She turned to the hollow map of the galaxy. The Council is finished. But power vacuums don't last forever. She exhaled. There will be others. And they'll come looking for us. Carter smirked. Let them. He looked out the window where the Revenant-class dreadnoughts hovered silently in orbit. We'll be ready. The final warning. 1 week later, a final message from Earth was sent across the stars. Not a declaration. Not a treaty. A warning. It was simple. It was clear. It was unforgettable. Humanity does not seek war. But if you bring it to us, we will end it. The end.